Avoir. Okay, Autumn, welcome back.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we were just talking beforehand. It's been about 4 years since we sat down and talked together.
Yeah.
And there have been some big changes with regard to your flock of dogs.
Yeah.
So I figured we'd just start out talking about what's going on with your own dogs.
All right. Well, I have 2 dogs now. I had 0 at the time. I have Ozzy, who I got as a puppy. He was a COVID dog in the sense of I got COVID and decided to get a dog. So I had a Christmas where I had gotten a stocking, and I didn't know what to do with it. I got it at like a store when I went shopping, and I was like, what do I do with this? So I reached out to all my clients and I said, let's fill the stocking for a rescue. And a friend of mine had a whole litter of puppies. So I got a bunch of stuff. My clients are amazing. And I went and delivered it, and she was like, do you want to meet the litter? And lo and behold, I have a puppy.
Yeah, you can't meet a litter without bringing home a puppy.
Exactly. So I ended up saying no. I went home and I was like, no, I don't need it. Then it was that Christmas that everybody got COVID. And so I was home with COVID and I was like, okay, I do want a puppy. I don't know who finds themselves dying on the couch and says, I would love to be able to take something out every 2 hours, but I chose to.
In the cold.
Yes. And it was great because the lady who had the litter ended up getting COVID. And so she was like, well, you can come over now because we can't give each other COVID. So I'm like the only one with a no go home photo because it was under the radar. So I got him, and then that was 2021, I think. And then I got Reggie just over a year ago, almost a year and a half, I think. And he was supposed to be a foster. He is an awesome dog, and I just basically couldn't let him go. He comes off as a super easy dog, but he's also a lot of dog. So I decided to just keep him.
That's awesome. Can we go back to Ozzy for a second?
Yeah.
Was the litter intentional? Is he a bred dog?
Oh, he's a rescue.
Okay.
His litter actually wasn't even supposed to come this way. They were going to a different rescue, and that rescue had an issue where someone fell ill or something. So in transit, it diverted.
Okay.
And I did his DNA. He is mostly pit, and then 27% Pomeranian and 15% German Shepherd.
Okay. He's got pointy ears.
Yeah,
he's a pointy-eared dog.
Yeah.
Both of your dogs.
Yes. Yeah.
And Reggie, what is his story?
He came from a client of mine was fostering him. He previously lived at a sheep herding farm. He's an Australian Kelpie, so he's bred for sheep herding. And his father has incredible lines. Like, he's won championships. I don't know all the details of sheep herding, but he's amazing. I met a lady in New York that knew who he was, but he did not produce the best litter.
Okay.
His whole litter didn't do well.
With sheep herding specifically, not bad dogs. Just
no,
with
not
that
bad
particular
dogs.
job there.
Yeah. Like some of them are okay at herding, but they, I don't know all the details on all of them. But my dog Reggie can't take correction, so he can't take pressure, like even just spatial pressure. He just quits. He does that in his day-to-day life. Like if I give them each a treat and he drops his, and Ozzy even looks at him, he'll walk away.
Very sensitive.
Yes. He's super sensitive. He's just wants to please everybody. And he'll put himself on the back burner for that. So I have to stand up for him a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's good observations on your part as the handler.
Yeah.
Instead of just trying to make it happen.
Oh, yeah. Ozzy is a bully. His number one goal is to be the biggest idiot in the room. If somebody tries to challenge that, he will step it up. So, Reggie does a lot of putting up with Ozzy.
Well, we have a similar dynamic in our pack.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool to meet you, get to know you a little bit. Obviously, you are an amazing dog walker and trainer, and just to see more dogs added to the pack.
Yeah.
And also I don't get to experience GRC, but I know that that's a big part of your training development. I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. GRC has been incredible. So I started about I would say probably coming up on 2 years, maybe a year and a half ago. It was before I got Reggie. It was just Ozzy. And then I got Reggie shortly after. And Ozzy's life has changed. Ozzy is very human reactive, honestly reactive to anything. He hates plastic, any form of plastic.
I was not expecting you to say that. I was expecting you to go down the whole doesn't like men, doesn't like, nope, hates plastic. Okay.
Plastic and
plastic bags.
Yep. And any human. Doesn't matter gender. He doesn't discriminate. He's very straight across the board. It's very hard for him to make friends, but he makes friends if they have a dog. So if he enters a space with other dogs, he's fine. I've had many trainers, Val, who is Technicolor GRC, J Jack, many people have tried to be his friend. Mm-hmm. And as soon as you try, you're dead to him.
Gotcha.
And trying with just tossing treats. And he's like, I know your plan.
Yeah, you're trying to hide something.
Yeah. So we started with Technicolor. They are amazing. Currently, I think trying to find space to do more stuff out of, and I will absolutely continue going there. And now there is Cell Shore.
Which is close to home for you.
Yeah.
And that's Sam and Katrina?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good people. Yeah,
definitely good people. That is in Hingham. And it's just life altering for a dog like Ozzy. Any dog benefits from it. Reggie does really well at it. Some dogs just pick up on things easier. Some dogs don't. So for Ozzy, there's 3 sections. The first section, you have to greet 3 people, and the dog has to be polite, similar to CGC, I think. And then you have to do a figure 8, 3 figure 8s, and that's all about loose leash walking and greeting people politely. And then you get a scoring break, and then you go into the obedience section where you do middle, you turn, you down your dog goes into a 2-minute down. And then in that down, you have to do distractions. So go out of sight. It's whatever the judge chooses, but it's typically go out of sight, drop a bag of treats, different things like that. And then you have to greet a neutral dog, is usually a very big distraction that they choose. Then once your 2 minutes is up, you get your scoring break, and then you go into the at liberty section. So you have 2 minutes of your dog just behaving. And it's interesting because I started with GRC, and then we've done, some rally, we've done other things. And in rally, they keep telling me to talk to my dog.
Yep.
But I'm so used to in GRC, I lose points. Mm-hmm. So every time I give a command or I give a correction or anything, I will lose points.
Sure.
And then in rally, she's like, talk to him. And I'm like, I can't. I'm going to lose points.
Yeah, I know. GRC is just a totally different game, I think. Yeah. And those of us that do formal obedience are kind of like, what the hell is this? But from a practical ownership standpoint, I think that there is a lot that we can take from GRC and apply it to regular life, kind of. Yeah. Just like hanging with your dog, which I think is really cool. I love the different approach. And I think that there are definitely I'm not even going to say cons. I think that there are benefits of doing both. And I'm hoping that once we get to work together, it'll make a little bit more sense when you start working on formal healing versus just walking around with your dog. Because that's something that I do a lot of is the formal head up healing for obedience, which is a hard thing to train. And it's a party trick.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end of the day, it's a party trick.
Yeah.
It's cool. It looks really classy, but my dog's not walking around with me like that. Aside from the 2 minutes that were in the rally ring or the 5 minutes, 7 minutes that were in the obedience ring, you know, that's what it is. Yeah. So I love how GRC is really taken off, and I love the different groups that are forming and just being, fulfilling all the areas, I guess you could say, Metro West, South Shore, a little bit north. Yeah. I think it's great to see people getting involved. And I also think it's great because I'm sure for a dog like Ozzy, you're probably doing a lot of training for it, but maybe not so much trialing for it. Is that the case with him? Yeah.
So we've done one trial so far. I had Reggie signed up intentionally, and I threw Ozzy in day of because there was an empty spot. And, I knew he was going to fail. Jay was the judge, and he knew he was going to fail. We were just kind of seeing what what he was going to
assess.
do in a trial setting.
Sure.
Because it's a really different entrance and everything. And so he did great. He actually only lost 2 points in section 1, and it's only because he looked scared. And Jay said, I can't give a perfect score to a dog that looks scared because you could use heavy compulsion to get them to do what you're asking, and that's not the picture that we're looking for.
Right.
So he only lost 2 points there. I was shocked. And then he got to the down section and he broke the down, which NQs us. And so Jay said, you've NQ'd. Do you want to end on a positive? And his favorite command is middle. So I was like, I'll call him to middle. I called him to middle and he wouldn't move. And I was like, what happened? And I looked and Jay was standing right next to me. And I was like, oh, it's you.
Yeah.
So I walked away from Jay and called him again and he ran over.
Okay.
But middle is one of my favorite ones because Ozzy utilizes it so much. Honestly, sometimes too much. I have to, like in rally, I had to walk with my legs touching because he would just shoot into middle. But he uses it when he's scared. And it's a big indicator for me, like, oh, he's nervous. I have to figure out what scared him. Is there a plastic bottle over there or is there a person coming with an off-leash dog? I don't know. So that one's been amazing.
Yeah. Safe space.
Yeah. Yeah. And GRC is all about real world. Like if my dog is scared of something, I can call them to middle, down them, and be able to walk off of them to fix whatever's happening.
Right.
Because that's one of the things that we're practicing for.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, the real world is 10 times more challenging than doing any other type of trialing. And as far as I'm concerned, there's just so many variables that you can't control. So you just have to work on controlling what you can, and that's your own dog and their behavior.
Yeah.
I tell people, even if another dog runs up on you, you still make up 50% of that equation.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you don't want it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, it's like, well, I didn't ask for this. It's like, doesn't matter. You're in it now.
Yeah. Yeah. That was actually an interesting topic that came up once for me where my dogs love other dogs. But if there's an off-leash dog charging them, they are not well behaved. And I don't expect them to be. Because if I expect them to behave if I have control of the situation. So if I'm telling the person, call your dog, and they're calling their dog and everything is going smoothly, I expect them to behave. If that dog is blowing off the other owner and about to charge into their face, I let them react. Because the other dog's not listening to anybody and hopefully it will listen to them.
Right. Yeah.
So that came up. I had actually posted a video of a lady yelling at me that I was the problem with my on-leash dogs.
Yeah. Fun times.
Yeah.
Ugh,
and so people had said, you should have put them in a down and held them in a down. And I said, what would that have done for them?
I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
Because down is such a submissive position.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like the dog is like defenseless.
Yes.
And
they already feel defenseless on leash being charged. So why am I going to make them more defenseless?
Yep.
Yeah. So that was a topic that I had some good conversations about, actually.
Yeah. Always, I think that anytime you can talk to somebody that might not know etiquette very well, I think it can be helpful if you can present a different idea. Like, well, this was my perspective and you made my life really hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I get it. I do the same thing that you do as far as hikes.
Yeah.
I have the dogs off the leash and you do more on leash stuff.
Yep.
Which I commend you for. I don't know how you do it. But yeah, just being in public is really, really challenging. So
yeah.
It's something that I constantly am looking and listening for where other people are.
Yep.
And I am very attuned. So I turn around, I change directions, I go off. I do whatever it takes not to have to come in contact with anybody.
Yeah, we do the same. We actually, so I have basically a 5-to-1 ratio at max. So sometimes we'll have 3 dogs each. Sometimes we might have 5 each, depending on who the dogs are too. And me and my staff all walk together. So, but we could be on certain days of the week, if there's 4 of us, we could have 17 dogs.
Sure.
But we are also the ones who turn around or pull off the trail and I have so many people that are super nice and they'll be like, oh, we can move. And I'm like, no, they're used to it and they always need the practice. So we are constantly pulling off into the woods, having the dog sit, they're getting treats for behaving, and then the person goes by.
Yep.
And it's nice.
I love it. You have people to work with. I haven't done that yet, but it's always been in my mind. Like, what if I met up with another cool walker and we just like walked together
Yeah.
And this would also be 10 times safer, but
That's
a totally
actually
other issue.
I know, right? That's partly how I got my number one staff. She is amazing. She does most of my walks. She's my hike manager on the days that I'm not there. She was working for herself and she just was struggling to advertise, and she was doing solo walks, and she was like, "Can I come shadow you?" And I said, "Sure, anytime, come shadow me." And she shadowed me a few times. And then I was like, "Instead of shadowing, would you like to get paid a couple days a week?" And she was like, "Actually, yes." And so I hired her, very minimal at first, and it's just expanded over time. And recently she was like, "I'd like to start doing afternoon walks for you." And I was like, "Anything."
Yeah, because you're a morning person, right?
Yeah.
You do everything in the morning?
Yeah. So our hikes are in the morning. Usually we get to the trail, we aim for 8:45, but that gives us leeway to be out of the car by 9. And then we hike for an hour and a half and we load up at 10:30. And I mean, where I'm at, 90% of people work from home.
Yes.
So,
same.
yeah. So I have a few people that prefer afternoon because they go into the office or whatever they do. And so she's taking on afternoon hikes.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's somebody in Arlington that I've been kind of wanting to connect with.
Yep.
Just, I see what she's doing and I'm like, okay, let's see. I don't know. In my mind, I'm just like, maybe it would be good to have somebody else and see if they work in the similar way that I do.
Yep.
Because I do think that I'm unique. Like, I'm very laid back.
Yeah.
Very.
I think that helps you with
I
dogs
have
too.
all the dogs off the leash, but they're all on the e-collar and they behave and they stay close to me.
Yeah.
And they just are in a rhythm when we're out there and we have a really good time. And I'd only take 4 up to 4.
Yeah.
So I have taken 5, but the 5 will be, these 2 dogs are from the same household and they're old. You know,
Yeah.
or something like that, where
Yeah.
I know like they're just old faithfuls, like super high. I'm practically tripping over them, you know, because they're so close to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have a really good time when I'm out there, but there are times where I'm like, I could have double the number of dogs if I had another person. You know, I can't do it by myself.
Yeah.
I just can't. It's too dangerous. I don't know how these people go out with like 8 dogs with only one person. I have respect for them, but I mentally don't know how I would not be so stressed out that I'd lose that like relaxed feeling that I have when I'm out with the dogs. I never want to lose that. Just being
you would.
cool. Oh yeah, I know. That's why I don't
Yeah.
do it. And I know I'm leaving money on the table,
Yep.
but I if I get stressed out, like I can't do that every day.
Yeah.
Maybe once a week.
I did it in the company I used to work for. We were mostly off leash, and it was only, you know, if a dog couldn't be off leash, they were on leash. And there was a day I had 10 dogs by myself.
Ugh.
And that was the end for me. I was like, and it's not the company's fault. I mean, partially, but partially my own for accepting it. But you count. I ended up counting to 10 so many times.
I'm going
1,
crazy.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't do this anymore.
No, it's not fun.
No, it's not. And that was part of my reason for going on leash is no longer head counting. I know I have everybody. Also, I have a lot of dogs that get so overstimulated super fast. So just one dog running by them and they're like, you know, lunging in the air, trying to grab them. And some of my dogs aren't great with other dogs. And just the calm environment of walking on leash is so life-changing.
How long are the leashes?
6 foot.
Okay, so they're short leashes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. We have some dogs that are on a little bit longer. Like we have this tiny little King Charles that walks on a longer leash because she'd get lost if she was in with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
She needs to be off on our side. But other than that, yeah, everybody's on a 6 foot and it works so nicely. I don't know if I could ever go back.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
do what works.
Yeah.
I think that's.
I mean, if I
think it's
had
great.
4 dogs at a time, because my yard's not fenced, so I'll have my 2, and then sometimes I'll have, you know, extra dogs, and I don't mind having them in the yard. I've made a trail behind my house after my injury. I wasn't allowed to walk dogs, so I started walking my own 2 on long lines in trails behind my house that I started making. So I'll do 4 like that easy, but the public trails around me are just too frightening.
Bananas.
Yeah.
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I know we had this conversation online, but
Yeah.
I only go out for 40 minutes.
Yep.
So I can make smaller spaces work out. And there's 2 smaller spaces in our area. When I say smaller spaces, it's like, I don't know how many acres, maybe like 50 or something like that. But
Yeah.
you can cover 50 acres and no problem in a half an hour, if you're
Easy.
walking on a trail. But, I double back on myself and we have a good time. I let the dogs do their thing, but I don't need like the fells in order to make a hike, which
Yeah.
is good because around here, I would never go into the proper part of the fells. It's just an absolute zoo. And I had 3 conversations with clients in the past 2 weeks, and they were like, we were off leash in the fells, and then they tell me this horrendous story, and I'm like, okay, if you weren't there, that wouldn't have happened. So let's talk about some other places that you can go that are going to be a little bit safer, a little like times of the day that are a little better.
Yeah.
And I tell my clients, I'm like, you need to walk in these spots with no dogs so that you learn the trails and you learn where you can go to escape.
Yes.
Because it's like there's always trails that mountain bikers cut that you don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're walking on the main wide open part of the trails the whole time, you're going to meet somebody.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to learn how to traverse and make your way around, and you're not going to get lost. You're in the freaking city. You can hear the traffic. You know what I mean? I'm like, where I hike is like behind a high school. I can hear the bell.
Yeah.
It's like, just pay attention to what you're doing. Like, you don't have to be a rocket scientist or to have a compass, to know, but you have to make, like, I did a lot of mountain biking, and that's how I learned all the woods around here, is just by okay, there's a trail. Let me go down it and see what happens.
Yeah.
So I encourage my clients to do that. And if they don't do it, it's because they don't really like walking in the woods. And, that's another conversation I have with people. They're like, I want to go hiking. I'm like, okay, how much hiking are you doing right now?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, none. I'm like, well, do you like doing that activity? Because if you don't, that's totally fine. But you're not going to suddenly change your mind just because you have a dog.
Yeah. Yep.
And for some people, they're like, well, I'm scared to be in there by yourself. And I'm like, well, your dog's not going to protect you if you're if you're in there with a dog. So
no. Yeah.
Let's just get a couple things straight, first of all.
Yes.
But yeah, I love my job, but there are definitely some times where I'm just like, whew, my heart rate goes up to like 200.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It definitely can kickstart you better than coffee sometimes.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Like it happened to me because I have automatic windows in my car.
Okay.
And I see people, dog walkers, walk around with all the windows open. And
that terrifies me.
Right. And I always have the windows locked. And one time I didn't a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden in the back I hear, and one of my dogs was rolling the window down.
Yep.
I thought I was having a heart attack. I was like,
yes.
No, I'm like, but getting the window up, locking it, looking back behind me, and I'm just like, oh my god.
I've had that happen.
That's all it takes for me.
Oh yeah. I have this beagle that rests his arm on the armrest like a human.
So cute.
He's hilarious, and he will constantly roll down the window. And he just sits there looking at you like, why are you rolling down my window? It's kind of cold outside. Can you roll that up?
Oh my god.
Yeah. No, that scares me. The dogs hanging out the windows. I have a friend who does it, and she does it fine, and it works for her. But she has said to me, like, I know you won't do this, but if you did, how would you go about it? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm at the point where all my dogs are in crates.
Mm-hmm.
My staff, it's not. They have separation and dividers for dogs who, do better together versus others. But also we prep for who they're picking up and would never put them together with dogs that don't love each other. But yeah, I'm just now all crates. And it's like I just bought a bagel this morning that was too hot to eat. And so I left it on my center console next to me to cool off. And I was like, I couldn't have done this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It'd be gone.
And your car doesn't get as disgusting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, mine is mostly just a dog car at this point. So the amount that I clean it is not as much if it was humans.
I do mine quite a bit, like with the vacuum and whatnot, but I have one of those, it's just like a mesh divider between the front and the back, and the front stays perfect.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's so different.
It's awesome. Yeah, I just buzz around town. So I have 2 crates in the back that I'll put like a young dog in there.
Yep.
Or I have a couple of dogs that they're just a-holes when dogs get in and out of the car. They just go crazy. And they're fine once they're on the trails, but
Yep.
I just stick them in the crates and it's just 10 times easier. But most of the time they're loose. I'd never go on the highway with loose dogs, but
Yeah.
buzzing around town, I don't go very far. So it's, the system works for me, but they're not in the front seat. No. It gets dirty in 2 seconds. I'm like, I can't have this. It's just disgusting.
Yes.
You know?
We do have one Vizsla that rides in the front seat because if you put her in the back, she acts like you've put her with peasants. It's actually, if she rolls in something, she has to ride in the back as punishment. And actually yesterday she wasn't in a crate and I forget what she was doing in the car, but she was whining in the car. And so I cracked the window because it was raining and that was her punishment.
Yeah. So wet.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, on the topic of getting out into the woods. So, I mean, obviously there's the All Trails app now, but before that, I would pin my car on Apple Maps so that I could go out and then be like, all right, well, this direction gets me back to my car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little things like that go a long way.
Yep.
But figuring things out in the woods, like I said, trails that people cut that aren't on the maps, there's so many of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it goes a long way so nobody knows what nobody knows.
I know.
And then
those are the best.
Listening, I don't wear earphones or, whatever. Like I'll take a call if it's like a quick call or whatever, but I'm listening because half the time if it's a dog walker, they're so damn loud. I can hear them from a mile away. They're just screaming the whole time.
Yeah. So, screaming some dog's name.
I know where you are.
Yeah. I love that. On Fridays, I have a dog that walks in the trails that I'm at, and I've passed her, and she lets him off leash because he barks on leash. So I can hear them when they pull up, and I can hear when she does the little bit of the trail where she keeps him on, and then I can hear when he goes off leash, and that's when I get nervous. I go, where is he? Where is he? I can't hear him anymore.
You do have the spidey senses turned on when you do this job, for sure.
Oh, yeah. If I'm out with just my two, I'll put one headphone in on low and just kind of...
Yeah, they're reliable.
Yeah. And they're not even off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're still on leash. I don't even let my dogs off on public trails.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
anytime I can get back to... I grew up on a farm in Hudson.
Yeah.
So anytime I can get back there to let the dogs run, it's my favorite because I know there's going to be nobody there. So it's amazing. And we were talking earlier about my dog, Ruben, his radius is like so far. So I just let him go and he just loves it. He's like a little kangaroo. It's the cutest thing.
I know. They're so funny. Ozzy doesn't love getting in the car. So he'll go out of the house, like I have to cross over my driveway to get into my yard. So he'll kind of like slink across the driveway and then look at me. And once I walk past my car, he runs and bolts and gets so excited.
Yeah. You got to let him run.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. Let's head into talking about this book here. I did a little bit of a summary and a few of my takeaways in the previous episode I recorded with Laurie. So Autumn listened to the book.
Yep.
And I read the book, and I also have the Forever Dog Life book. Do you have that?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Forever Dog, written by Rodney Habib and Karen Becker, published in 2021, and then they did a supplemental text called the Forever Dog Life, which is more or less a recipe book.
Yeah.
It has recipes for complete meals, also treats, and then what they call core longevity toppers, which are different things that you can add to your dog's food to kind of enhance it a little bit. And the book also has recipes for like homemade cleaners, soaps, and things of that nature. But I already gave kind of my takeaways, so I'm interested in hearing your perspective after reading the text, and hopefully we can get into some back and forth on this.
Yeah. Yeah. So the main thing I took from the book was they said it many, many times. If you can change 10% of what you're doing now is going to be a lot for your dog. So that was really nice to hear because the book itself, like trying to change everything would be so overwhelming. I definitely went down some rabbit holes and and I was like, oh no, I can't have this. I can't have that. And like, there was even one of the ones that really got me to like step back and go, okay, just do your best. I use all stainless steel bowls because they're the best. And they were saying that, but then they said there was also like a stainless steel recall at one point. And I was like, okay, I have to just do the best I can. I can't I have 2 kids.
Yeah.
I have myself, I have my business, and I have my dogs. And I have to put as much effort into all of those equally. So I was like, I can't start researching too much. I'm lucky where for food, I have a co-op that I can pick up monthly supplies of. And it is honestly, when I was reading the book, I was like, oh, wow, what I have is already amazing.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Organics.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
New Hampshire.
Yes. I
Yeah.
think they're out of New Hampshire. So
I'm doing my first pickup this month.
Yay.
Yeah.
You'll love it. You'll love it. So it's also the best price point too.
Oh my God, it's so cheap.
It's so cheap. And I ended up using the cookbook because I had misjudged my order one month. And so I was like, oh, I need to make food. And I was like, oh, I'll use the cookbook. It's probably equal. I didn't save much. I was doing the math and I was like, I don't think I saved any money from
not to go down a rabbit hole as we are starting out, but let's do it. Their chicken products are like $2 and I think 70 cents a pound.
Yeah.
And that's about the price point of when I'm making my own poultry mix.
Yeah.
So on the order that I just put in, I ordered for chicken and then I ordered the backs and necks and liver so I can do like the meat and supplements myself and just add the bone and the organ.
Yeah.
And that's $2 a pound.
Yeah.
For that. So it's like you're not going to be able to do it cheaper. So
No.
I feel like as long as your dog does well on the food, if you're local, it's a really good option.
It is. I mean, I've had to buy a freezer just for food.
Yeah, that's another issue we can talk about too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because I have 2 dogs on it. They eat roughly a full pound a day each. So that's 2 pounds a day. That's with, extra additives and depending on how much they've done a day. But so I have to stockpile a lot. I got a stand-up freezer and I talked about it for like 6 months. My kids kept picking on me. They were like, you're such a mom. I was like, I love my stand-up freezer.
Yep.
But it's well worth it in the long run because I've had times that I've had to, miscalculate how many days in between the next order and I have to, go buy something at another store, or I started making it because I was like, oh, that's going to be so much cheaper. It's really not.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was able to do... Okay, let's stop talking about this for now. Your takeaways. So first takeaway was a 10% rule.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely well over 10% because there was a lot of the book, which I think a lot of us in your area, my area are, because a lot of the book I think they were talking about box life. Is that what they were calling it? People who live in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And so some dogs actually never touch dirt.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of shocking to me
Mm-hmm.
because I make a living on putting dogs in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a lot of things that were very extreme, but then there were a lot that I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. One of the major takeaways, I have a lot of dogs on prescription food.
Mm-hmm.
And
Same.
And the fact that prescription food is just food, like there is no prescription. They said in the book that it means it's sold at a vet's office.
Right.
And that was shocking. I mean, I knew it wasn't great to begin with. But my major takeaway from the book was I know people, and I'm not calling anybody up, but I know people that will go to their own doctor and say, oh, I have this problem. And their doctor will say, okay, take this medication. And they leave the doctor's office. They don't fill the prescription. They start researching and changing diet and changing different things and saying, I didn't even need that medication. But when they take their dog to the vet and the vet says, you need this medication, they immediately fill it and just feed it.
Right.
And so I think people are changing. People are deciding that, their dog deserves what they have. But kibble is processed food.
Mm-hmm.
And the one where they referred to it as like when you go into the hospital and you get Ensure.
Yes.
Because it's a full balanced meal and you get that, but it's always only temporary.
Right.
And our dogs are on that for life.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
I know. So my takeaways from the book are there's a lot that I'm doing amazing at.
Yeah.
For example, the book talks a lot about exercise, being out in nature, getting the steps in, forest bathing, I think is what they call it. And okay, we're doing a good job with that.
Yeah.
Things like plastics and cleaning products and whatever, I talked about it last time, but it's kind of like a do your best thing.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not going to get away from using plastics as a human being. I can't expect to completely get away from my dog interacting with plastics. I mean, it's insane how much plastic we're using and how we don't really know what the long-term ramifications are of the fact that we're like literally breathing it in and eating it like every single day.
Yep.
Okay, that's a huge problem. I'm just going to hope for the best.
Yep.
You know?
I mean, you could do no plastic in your house, but go out to dinner and it was delivered in plastic.
Yeah, you sit inside your car and you're surrounded by plastic.
Yes.
You know, it's like you go on the bus, you go to the movie. I mean, it's
unavoidable.
It's unavoidable, right? So all we can do is the best we can do in this moment. Stainless steel bowls, ceramic, glass, etc. Okay. Cleaning products. Sorry, I'm using bleach if the dog pukes. If if they don't, great. I'll use my apple cider vinegar.
Yeah.
Open the windows. I hate fragrances with a passion when it comes to household making things smell better.
Yeah.
I've always been that way. So again, I was looking at the book and saying, well, okay, if I take these recommendations, I'm doing a pretty good job. The way that I've fed my dogs in the past for about a year and a half, what I would do is buy those Instincts little bites of raw food that you get in the freezer section of Petco or Pet Supply Plus. And I was able to use my coupon at Pet Supply Plus. So I would just go and get like 10 bags of that, and I would feed half of their meal in the morning was half raw and half kibble, and then they just eat a normal meal at night. So even before I switched to feeding my dog more whole foods, I was already at like 25% of raw food in their diet. So I was like, okay, well, I was already doing a good job at that if I'm taking this book's recommendations. So I felt pretty good actually after reading it. I was like, okay, we're doing an okay job. Now the question is, how do we interact with our clients who are constantly asking us questions about this stuff? I don't know if your clients are the same as mine, but they're always like, well, what do you feed? I'm like, oh, you know what I mean?
I hate that question.
And the other thing is like, I feed my dog Bill Jacks for training, which is like a super highly processed food, but she's so damn sensitive to anything that I use for training that I'm like, this food does not hurt her belly. It's so easy to use for training because she doesn't have to chew it, because I know you use food for training, but like if you're feeding them freaking Mother Hubbard cookies and it's taking them 10 minutes to chew the damn thing, it's like really ineffective.
Yes.
So, I feed that for training. I'll buy a thing of milk bones and like the chewy ones, and like, every once in a while I have those in my, so I'm not completely, bound to this like all natural thing, but the majority of their diet is now like more natural foods. And for me, it's like, well, that makes sense. Feed the dog normal food.
Yeah.
Like, why is that such a freaking crazy ass idea?
Yeah, I know. That was one of the things that, I mean, I knew, but reading the book, I was like, yes, it makes so much sense. Like, just feed food. And I have so many clients that are like, oh, I've never fed my dog people food. And I go, but why? And they're like, well, I just don't. I'm not supposed to. And I was like, why?
Well, it's because when they do feed people food, it's like a ribeye steak or a piece of turkey that has grease and rendered fat all over it,
Right.
So it's like,
or it's from the table.
Right. And you have these dogs that are like have pancreatitis because their dad is just feeding them ham all day. And it's like, okay, that's not the type of food that we're talking about.
Right.
I think that because feeding table food, it is dangerous because people are feeding them like, chicken skins fried. It's like, it's like, don't do that.
Oh, my grandmother used to take her plate when she was done and put it on the floor next to her for her dog.
Oh boy. Gravy.
So we're
French
not talking
fries.
that. Yeah. That's not the level you should do. But I recently got rid of my chickens. I had them for, I think it was like somewhere between 8 and 10 years. And I actually gave them to Sam.
Oh, cool.
Because she had a bunch. She has a better winter setup, and I was like, take them. And so I find myself with all this extra food because it used to just go out to the chickens. And I was like, I have dogs. So as I'm prepping food, I just give it to the dogs now for the most part.
And most of that's like vegetables, right?
Yeah. Because I mean, you can feed chickens meat. I think it's weird.
Yeah.
I never did.
Yeah.
I've heard
mealworms or
mealworms are fine, but like people have given chickens chicken carcasses.
Oh,
And that's just,
that seems like cannibalism.
yeah, I thought it was a little weird, so I just can't do it.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that it's so challenging because to go up against a veterinarian's advice when I don't have the credentials, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not I'm not even a behaviorist because I don't believe in what they have to do in order to get that title.
Yeah.
Obviously not a veterinarian. It's like all I can do is tell you what I do and what works for me. And if I had your dog, like I don't even necessarily want to give that direct advice, but I'm always like, little pumpkin, little cooked chicken, like stick some veggies in the blender is not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Broth, things that are accessible and that you make for yourself.
Yep.
Like throw to your dog, but some people don't cook for themselves. So I have to take that into consideration too. You don't?
I rarely cook. My kids, there was a running joke in my house for a while. So for scent work class, Reggie uses meatballs. So I had a bag of meatballs defrosting. There's store-bought meatballs. And my daughter came to me like 3 days later. She was like, weren't you going to make meatballs one day this week? And I was like, no, that was for the dog.
Well, that's funny.
So I don't do a lot of cooking. My kids are 15 and 16. They're pretty on their own. One's about to be 17. She'll be in college the year after next. So like, I'm just letting them understand what it's like to be on their own already.
Perfect. Perfect.
But yeah, I do a lot of prepping for my dogs and not anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? If it works and it works for you, I say do it.
Yeah.
I said this on the previous episode, but hygiene and cleanliness is a huge part of cooking for your dogs, cleaning their dog bowls, making sure that you're wiping surfaces with something that's going to disinfect. Like if you're not doing those things already, it's really hard to change people's cultural habits surrounding what their dog eats. And I think to go back to your point about the owner just giving the dog a prescription or whatever, our dogs can't talk to us.
Yeah.
So for a person, they can say, oh, I started eating this food instead of this food and my stomach feels a little bit better. Isn't that cool? If you're a dog owner, you have to be like out there looking at your dog's poop to see if it's making their stomach feel better. So it takes a little bit more perception on the part of the owner. And I think for you and I, it's really easy. I know straight away if I feed my dog something and the next day or even hours later, like it's not agreeing with them.
Yeah.
And for an everyday dog owner, it might be a little bit more difficult to pick up on some of that stuff. But yeah, paying attention to the dog's biofeedback is the way that your dog is telling you whether or not like it's working.
Yeah.
And even things like weight gain. I mean, when my clients' dogs go on those prescription food, all of a sudden the waistline is bulging.
Yes. And the muscle tone is gone.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, geez. And it's one thing if they're an older dog, like, okay, but I'm taking this dog hiking.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And they're active and they're working and I want them to feel good when they're out there.
Yeah.
I don't want them to be like in the poop squat the whole time because their stomach hurts.
Yes.
And which happens.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it is a part of my job to make sure that they're walking, but they're also healthy.
Yeah.
So if they're sick or whatever, like I tell the owner straight away.
Yes. I do too.
And the food definitely plays into it because if we look at food as medicine, which I know is like a very like Chinese type of way of looking at things, and it's just so challenging because it's called pseudoscience when doctors or veterinarians are faced with working with a patient that is curious about diet. And I know this because I have an autoimmune disease. So my doctor will not touch food as an option for treatment.
Okay.
If I ask her, do you think changing my diet might help and I don't have to be on this medication, she flat out says no.
Yeah.
But I know that it's the funniest thing because if I don't eat for a day, I don't have symptoms. So it's like if I fast, I know if I have a flare up and I'm not on medication, if I don't eat for a day or even like a morning, my symptoms will get better.
Wow.
So it's like, I know it's what I'm eating.
Yes.
I know
Yeah.
that it is what I'm eating. And it's not, and yeah, maybe it's anecdotal, but like,
Yeah.
can we still just acknowledge that there's something going on here? And the doctors like will not even consider it, you know, and I do think that to a degree it's because the medication works, you know, like if I go on prednisone, the flare up goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like an easy fix. And I do that because I'm suffering from it, you know, so I'm not saying that, you know, food is going to completely solve the problem, but I know that it is part of the solution at the very least.
Yeah, and it could help with flare-ups, and you could have less flare-ups and need less medication.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that with dogs where they end up on whatever prescription and then they're just on it for life.
Right. Well, even with Ruben, the dog is garbage disposal. Okay.
Yeah.
With Raven, I have to feed her a certain type of kibble. Like I can't. So she eats right now. Let me tell you how much this dog eats. Your dog eats a pound of food. Okay. Ruben eats a pound of food a day, raw food.
Yep.
Okay. So very reasonable amount of food.
Yes.
If I feed Raven just raw food, she eats 2.5 pounds a day.
Wow.
And she just got spayed a month and a half ago. So I'm thinking, okay, her metabolism's probably going to slow down a little bit. I'm just going to cut back the food slightly. No, like last week, I looked at the dog and I'm like, if I brought that dog to the vet, they'd be like, you're abusing this animal. She's so skinny. So I'm like, oh my God. So yeah, 2.5 pounds of raw food. That's expensive.
Yes.
Let me tell you.
Yep.
And to be honest with you, that wasn't even doing it.
Yeah.
So I was like, this dog needs to eat kibble. She does really well on the one kibble that we feed. We feed a Nook Shook, and I've fed her Pro Plan in the past. Both not the greatest kibbles, right? There's corn and wheat in there, but her stomach, perfect. So 1 meal a day, she eats kibble. She eats 2 cups of kibble and 1 pound of raw food a day. And like I said, I'm hoping that she'll slow down a little bit, but it's just who she is. So I'm like, all right, well.
She's also super active.
Yeah, she's very active too.
Yeah.
So that's her. And it works really well for her. Ruben, any food that I have tried to feed Raven, I just give to him. So we have like a big bag of just mixed food. Yeah, that's like really expensive. Because I've tried to feed her carnivore. Have you ever heard of that food?
No.
Oh my God, it's like the most expensive one. It's like lightly cooked kibble.
Is it like
it's from
like
Canada?
Ziwi?
No, it looks like kibble, but it's not. I can't describe it really.
Yeah.
It's very like a lightweight air dried / like baked food.
Yep.
It's like $100 a bag.
Oh boy.
So I bought a small bag of that for her once. Nope, couldn't feed that. I've tried to feed I've tried to feed all the ones, and she just has a really hard time.
Yeah.
So he eats all the kibble, and his digestion is fine, but he has some skin problems. And since I've switched him over to eating more of a raw diet, his skin problem hasn't completely gone away, but it's literally like I picked him up yesterday and I showed Laurie and she's like, it's literally almost gone.
Yeah.
And the last time she brought him to the vet like a month and a half ago, he wanted to put Ruben on medication for it.
Yep.
And I think the medication probably would have worked. But if that small problem I can manage in a different way, like why the hell wouldn't I manage it in a different way? And that's what works for him. I'm not saying that will work for every single dog, but even though Ruben can eat any type of food, like it's like you said, kibble is still processed food. So who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I had to put Ozzy on that allergy medication. I had him on it for 2 days, and he turned extremely reactive, like charged my father one day. And so I called my vet and I said, has this ever, had any issues like that? And he said, no, maybe upset stomach. And I was like, okay, maybe he had an upset stomach. It kind of caused him to be irritable. And then I went to GRC and I talked to all my friends there and they were like, oh yeah, it causes aggression. And I was like, awesome. So, I mean, I have this back and forth battle with the vets where it's like, the book was actually enlightening in that too, where it's like, why won't they understand? I've gotten my vet to understand that I feed raw and my dogs look good and they're healthy and they don't fight me on it. But they have wanted me on, science diet. They've wanted me on everything because it's going to fix all of their problems. And so I was angry for a while at my vets, like, why can't they just understand that this works? And then I read the book, and it starts telling you that the vet schools are funded by the people that make the kibble. And I'm like, okay, so they just don't know.
Right.
I mean, I'm still slightly angry that they don't start researching, but I also understand when somebody goes in and says, oh no, I make my dog's food. And they're like, well, how do you know they're getting the right amount? How do you know they're getting what they should be having? Because I mean, if a dog can live its whole life on kibble, which has almost no nutrients in it, it can live its whole life on homemade food that has no nutrients.
Right.
So I can understand their reasoning behind not liking it for everybody, but I think they need to start researching.
Yeah, I think it's also really challenging because I've sat in seminars with nutritionists from pet food manufacturing companies, and the nutritionist is involved in the making of the food. They explain, and they believe in it.
Yeah.
And they feed their own dogs that food.
Yeah.
And they are smart people.
Yeah.
So I think I get it because I have listened to these people. They are good people that are really freaking smart and that have spent years developing these pet food formulas, and they feed their own dogs those formulas. And it's difficult because they put so much R&D and money into these pet food products, but it's because they are feeding a shelf-stable product that they are ensuring is going to work for your dog for their entire life. Mm-hmm. And if somebody sat across from me and said, I have this food product that we have developed after years of research, and it will absolutely fulfill every single nutritional requirement you need for the rest of your life, here, have it, I would want that product to be heavily researched and developed.
Yep.
I would want all the science to go into that product. But after reading this book, it's like, okay, but to get a whole food product to be shelf stable for that amount of time, you're doing so much processing and heating and reheating. And it's no surprise that there are these chemical byproducts that happen in that process that like aren't that great for you.
Yeah.
So it's like, I get both sides of the coin. I really honestly do. And when I hear the nutritionists speak, like they believe in it because they're working on it daily and they're looking at the data. Mm-hmm. And no, we don't have raw food trials that even compare to the amount of trialing that they do with these foods.
Yeah.
So I'm not like, in a way, I kind of don't know what to think. Yeah. Because I know that dog food, regular dog kibble, like it works.
Oh, it's worked for years.
It's worked for years. So, who am I? At the same time, like now we have vet care to manage these chronic illnesses that we didn't have before. Yep. So what's causing the chronic illnesses is still up for debate. Like, is it environmental? Is it the food? Is it all these other things? So again, the way I look at it is like, if dogs can eat regular old food and I have the knowledge and like I have a couple of recipes from actual nutritionists and then this book. Mm-hmm. It's like if I have the knowledge, I can supplement their food, feed them kibble so that if I die, Laurie's still be able to feed our dogs. Yeah. Why not try? Yeah. Why not just try and see what happens? And I mean, my personal dogs are doing great.
Oh yeah. My dogs are great on it. And I have a good comparison because Reggie I think he was on Pro Plan. Where he was before. And so probably his whole life he was on Pro Plan. And even the guy, because I go back there to go sheep herding and he sees him often. And when I had switched him to raw, it was like probably 2 months in and he was like, wow, he looks great. His coat looks awesome. He's so shiny. And I'm like, it's the food.
Yeah.
And I mean, the same argument is with humans. Like we started processing our food. I don't know the details, but like what the 50s TV dinner type stuff. And that's when we started having so many medications. People weren't doing as much medications and as much, going to the doctor because they were eating real food.
Right.
So It does make a difference. But we also have switched to different food because we have no time in life.
Right, to cook.
Yeah. And so it's not easy to prep your dog's food either.
Right.
So I can't say I would be doing the same if I didn't have the organics.
Right.
Because I couldn't afford others. And then on top of it, I'm not going to make food all the time.
Right. Yeah, every Sunday I make 15 pounds.
Yeah. No.
I've done that the past 3 weeks, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And doing it properly, so you're cleaning and making sure everything stays, sanitized. It's like, it's hard.
Yes.
And you need the equipment and you need the space. If you live in an apartment and your freezer is the size of a shoebox, you're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, you can't do it. That's why I like that the book says many times over, like, change 10%. Like, one part of the book said, if you just change your dog's treats to strawberries and blueberries, you're helping.
Right.
If you change their bowls from plastic to metal, like, there's stuff you can do within your realm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciated that a lot too.
Yeah.
And I love the recipes because some of them are more whole food recipes, and then they offer the recipe with the food and the supplement, and they say you can either feed this raw or cooked. So if you're not a huge fan of raw, you can just cook it, boil it or bake it or whatever with the supplements in there too.
Yeah.
I thought that was really helpful. And yeah, I like how if you are willing to think outside the box on the ingredients, and the other thing is things like organ meat and some of the seafood products, they're cheap.
Yeah.
A can of sardines is $1.
Oh yeah. There's a sardine one in there with cranberries.
Yeah, the relish.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've made it a few times now.
And you can just put that on top of your regular meal.
Yep.
And it's not even going to influence. It's going to influence the calories.
Yeah.
But as far as fortification, like, you don't have to put supplements in there. You just literally mix sardines with cranberries and a couple other things and keep it in a jar and throw a few scoops of that on top of your dog's kibble. And you're adding antioxidants and, EPAs and all the good stuff from the fish. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I took, after Thanksgiving, I put my turkey, the carcass, in a crock pot with, I think it was just water, and just left it for like 12 hours. And I had an entire thing of, I don't know what it's called because I don't cook, but one of my friends was
bone
like,
broth.
Yeah, but it was the gel.
Yes, the collagen.
The collagen. And my friend was like, people will pay good money for that. And I was like, well, I got a lot.
Yeah, I bought a turkey and I deboned it and took the carcass and boiled it down for the dogs. And it literally was like Jell-O.
Yes. It's amazing. So I used that. I put like a spoonful of that and put all their supplements in it and mix it up. And then like veggies that I want them to eat, because my dogs are really picky.
Oh, my dogs don't eat vegetables. Are you effing kidding me?
They're so off. There used to be this book when my kids were little about...
It's a joke.
Yeah. When my kids were little, there was this book like how to bake brownies with spinach and carrots in it. And I'm like, I feel like I'm doing that all over again.
Sneaking it in.
Yeah. But that bone broth, anything I mix in it, they'll eat it. And same with the sardine jelly. Like if I put some carrots in and coat it with the sardine jelly, they'll eat it all up.
Yes, if I put anything in the blender.
Yep.
So I just throw, honestly, fridge trash. It's like spinach, kale, broccoli, whatever. I put some broth in there, throw it in the blender, and put it on top of their food. They eat it right away. If I try to give them a piece of kale, they literally turn it into like a kale skeleton and leave it on the ground. It's like
Yes, I have this dance where Reggie will take it and then he drops it and he pokes it with his nose, and then Ozzy's like, oh, I think he likes it. I have to have it. So he'll go take it and then he'll drop it, and then Reggie will be like, I'll try again. And they just do this dance for 20 minutes before I'm like, okay, I'll just clean it up. So I do the same thing. I do like a food processor and I put in a little bit of like liver, like beef liver, and blend it all up and they eat it.
Yeah, beef liver is the same. I go into Market Basket. It was 99 cents a pound.
Yeah.
Because it was after Thanksgiving and they had the gizzards and the liver on sale.
Yep.
And that's the nice thing about feeding raw or cooked, is that you don't have to go and get a ribeye steak. In fact, you don't want to do that because the fat ratio to protein is not that great.
Yeah.
So a lot of the cheaper cuts are ideal, actually. Yep. So if you're cooking for yourself, it's not a difficult thing to do to cook for the dog as well. I think that was like a huge light bulb that went off in my head. It's like we cook constantly. Yeah. So it was an easy transition for me. And also getting away from the commercial raw food, it was like so much cheaper because $8 a pound for commercial raw food, like I just can't afford that. That's not doable for anybody. I even heard a pretty well-known dog trainer that like sells raw food. He was like, for only $8 a day. I'm like, dude, a normal person cannot afford this. Like only $8 a day to feed. I mean, you just can't ask somebody to do something like that. It's not feasible. Even for me, like I don't have children and my dogs, get the best of the best. It's like Raven eats so much raw food that even if I'm making it, it's expensive.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider, especially nowadays where I feel like everything is just so friggin' expensive. Even kibble is like ridiculous.
It is, especially for a good kibble. I had to, Reggie is a trash barrel. He can eat anything, but Ozzy, when I had him supplementing, he would throw up the kibble and keep the raw. So at first I was doing one meal. And then I went into adding some kibble to his raw. And when I did that, he would throw up the kibble.
Oh, man.
And so I was like, well, I feel like this is a sign.
Yeah. He's not doing that
right
on
in my
purpose.
face.
It's not like he's like, let me talk to my stomach and separate this out and get rid of the bad stuff.
Yeah. And it was like whole kibble.
Yeah, sure.
And the raw never came out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because it probably passed through his gut faster.
It does. It doesn't sit. So Ozzy has acid reflux. So if I don't feed him every 12 hours, he'll throw up bile. So I've actually been working on trying to get him to be able to do intermittent fasting once a week. And so I've started like every 3 days, their breakfast is a little bit of Ziwi with some peanut butter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like to get the idea of like you have something in your stomach, but not a lot. And he was able to skip a meal the other day, and I was so proud.
Oh, cool. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, my dogs puke if they don't eat.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
It's like clockwork. I'm like, it was funny because I was reading the book and the way the authors put it, it was almost like they were just being a little bit obstinate by throwing up bile. Did you read that part?
Yeah.
I was like, dude, I'm like, my dog's not being obstinate.
No.
They're just like empty stomach feed me.
Oh yeah. Ozzy will be sound asleep on my bed. But if I fed him at 5 o'clock at night, the night before, 5 a.m., he's jumping off the bed to throw up.
Yeah. Our dogs go a little longer.
Yeah.
They eat at like between 7 and 8 in the morning and they eat at 5 at night.
Yes.
So
yeah. That was another takeaway from the book. It was saying feed in daylight only.
Mm-hmm.
So like right now that would be like 7 and 4.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I could do that. But it makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It does make a lot of sense. It's funny too, because we always talk about how dogs like, oh, they don't poop at night.
Yeah.
We'll give them that last out and we're just like, just poop.
Yeah.
Because we're just worried about them. And the other day I was like, it's fine if they don't go at night. After thinking about it, like if they're on that circadian rhythm, they might not need to, because the sun set like 5 hours ago, especially nowadays where the days are so short.
Yeah.
But those were interesting concepts too that were brought about. One offline conversation that I had with another trainer, basically saying I started the book, but I couldn't get through it. And I think a reason why I hit a roadblock in this book was their training advice that they give in the book is just like cringeworthy, and I can totally see how any decent trainer would start reading it and be like, these people are so dumb.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's good to throw the baby out with the bathwater on that, because obviously training is not these people's forte.
Agreed.
They're writing a book about longevity and how to give our dogs like the happiest, healthiest life. And of course they're talking about exercise and things of this nature. But whenever they talk about training, I was just like, I'm rolling my eyes and be like, oh my God. So I guess my advice would be, if you're a decent trainer, just forget about it. Like, don't worry about it. But I can see how that would be a little bit of a roadblock for people that are good trainers,
I definitely tapped into my ADHD skills during that and just ignored it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I had to listen to it on audiobook because I'm very go, go, go. And if I stop, I sleep. So that's just how I am. So I had tried to read that book many, many times. And then when you reached out about doing a podcast on it, I was like, oh, well, truth be told, I never read it. So it was a good motivation for me, but I was like, I have to do audiobook. I just have to, because that's my motivation. When I have stuff to do, I can, like, I make leashes. I'll sit and listen to a podcast while I'm making leashes.
Sure.
While I, clean the house, I'll listen to a podcast. So I was like, it's just a no-brainer for me. But it also made it really easy to tune out some stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely just ignored that whole section.
Yeah, I think it's good to stay in your wheelhouse when you're working. Like, I can reflect on what they're saying, but again, I'm not going to say that I'm a nutritionist or
Right.
that I know. When I make food for my dogs, I'm not just winging it. Like,
Right.
I have recipes, like one of which I paid for, in order to kind of get a better understanding of this stuff. Because like I know my wheelhouse. So I think that was one of the things that I was reading, and I was just like, oh my God, like, no, what you just said is not true.
Yeah, I definitely was like, I'm just going to tune out.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, any closing thoughts about stuff that was covered here, or?
I will say that the cookbook is amazing.
Agreed.
The book itself is really eye-opening, but then it kind of, if I didn't have the cookbook and had finished the book, I would feel so overwhelmed. And I mean, ask your dog trainer, ask your dog walker. They probably know a lot about it. We're not freely giving it.
Right.
Because
what
every
a
time,
great point. Yeah.
Yeah, because every time I do, somebody's like, oh, my dog's not doing great on this food. What do you feed? And I'm like, I literally look at them and I go, do you want me to tell you? And they go, yeah. And I go, I feed my dogs raw. And they go, oh. And I go, do you want to go further with the conversation or no? And I have a lot of people that are like, I can't do it. And for various reasons. And there's nothing wrong with cooking it. But I've had clients say, like, what do you do if your dog eats and then licks your kid's face? And I'm like, I don't worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also see, like, if I tell my kids to feed my dogs, they are gagging the entire way from the kitchen to the crates. One of them will literally put on rubber gloves, and it's just to hold the metal bowl. Like, it's not, I've already prepped it. I'm just saying, can you carry this to the crate? And she's like holding her nose with rubber gloves on. And I'm like, you're not even touching it.
That's how Laurie is.
Yeah.
She gets so grossed out.
Yeah. And I can understand that. And if you can't do it, you can't do it. But adding fruits and veggies and adding different things. And even if you were to do like fruits and veggies in the blender with like some bone meal, I bet it would add flavor, some broth, some different things. And then one of the takeaways in the book was, if your dog doesn't eat it, try again. And I've tried that with a few things recently, and I get it on like the third or fourth try.
Right.
Yeah.
Also, some of the products, like the probiotic that we feed our dogs, has beef liver in it as a base. So I know that if a dog isn't eating and I put a little bit of that in it, like, not only is it giving the probiotics, but it's also adding a little bit more flavor to the food. It's like, yeah, it adds a little bit of punch there, because most dogs, when organ meat is involved, whether it's real or it's freeze dried or it's in a powder because it's in a supplement or something, they'll be really into eating it.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, this was a difficult book to read.
Yes.
Especially the first two parts, because it's just all science and theory, and it's hard.
Yeah.
And the third part of the book was more, this is what you can do.
Yeah.
And then the cookbook is really breaking down this is what you can do into very easy steps and, easy recipes. For me, the recipes just aren't big enough. So, I had to like double or triple.
Yeah.
In order to get the amount of food that I would need just to make it through like a week.
Yep.
And some of the ingredients, I'm not so sure that my dogs are going to do well on, like the flax or the wheat germ oil and stuff like that, because with my dog Raven, I'm not sure what's setting her off about the higher quality foods. My guess is that it's the carbohydrate sources, because when you feed a dog raw, they're 50-50 pretty much, with a little bit of fiber. So 50% fat, 50% protein, and a little bit of fiber. Even if you feed an incredible quality kibble, you're still 50% carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Because the manufacturing companies, it's very deceiving because they'll be like, this is a 30-20 blend of, protein to fat. It's like, okay, well, what about the other 50%? What the hell is that? And they're like corn and wheat, and it's like, people look at that protein to fat ratio and they're like, oh, this is a good quality food. But it's like, well, if you fed your dog real food, it would be 50-50 with a little fiber to make sure that they go to the bathroom. But I think for her, like, it's either the synthetic supplements or the carbohydrate sources that are like setting off her system. And there's a couple of ingredients in the cookbook where I'm like, I'm not sure if I bought an entire bottle of this, if it would like agree with her. Yeah. So I do like a little bit of substituting there just to make sure that I don't deal with diarrhea. But
I've done the same. And then some of the recipes that I've done, I've prepped all the organ meat and the veggies and the fruit and whatever's in it, not the base meat. And I put it in the freezer. And so then when I'm ready to feed it, I have all of that ready and I just add turkey or beef or whatever protein I'm doing.
That works.
So that was a really good way for me to do it and just have it be easy and just spend like a whole day prepping a bunch. And I have, a month's worth of the additives in a container. So when I take it out, I can then, a week's worth, not a month. That would not last long.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I have also modified a few things, looking at it and going, I don't know how my dogs would do on that. So what I did was I made the recipe without the questionable things and then tried it another time, a couple weeks later with the questionable things and seeing if it makes a difference.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that's different about feeding dogs versus feeding us is that calcium and phosphorus that people really need to understand before they get into feeding their own dogs. Because the book talks about it too, how there was a case where a woman was just feeding her dog like chicken and broccoli for like 10 years. And she goes to the vet and the dog is like on death's door, because like I can eat chicken and broccoli for 10 years and I'm going to be fine. Yeah. But a dog can't. Like they need more calcium and phosphorus at a certain ratio in order to be healthy.
Yep.
So at the very least, if you are going to go down the road, like use a freaking recipe, and there are a lot of good ones. And if you're questioning, you can go online and speak to a nutritionist and they'll give you one.
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy to do nowadays. So that would be like my biggest recommendation. Also, when I'm dealing with a dog that is sick and has diarrhea, I know this isn't in the books or anything like that, but I don't feed the dog.
Yeah.
Just like I don't feed myself. Like if I get sick, I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to go eat a meal. So even if your dog is on a prescription food for GI or whatever, like if your dog is sick, like skip a meal.
Yeah.
Let their stomach settle down a little bit. And then my go-to is always chicken and pumpkin.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, cooked.
Yes.
So, and I mean, I dealt with that with Raven just last week because I tried it, a few weeks ago. I tried a new kibble.
Yeah.
Just horrible. Laurie called me at work. She's like, this dog is so sick. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And the same thing, fasted. And then the next day I made chicken and pumpkin and it just worked straight away. And the book talks about both of those ingredients, especially pumpkin. It's just like kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. And the other takeaway from the book is like with kibble, you have to stick with the same one or you have the issue that you had. But with raw or like natural diets, variety is what you need. You
my God.
To change it up.
can feed Raven. Yep. I have not fed her a single thing that I've made in my kitchen that has made her sick.
Yeah. Yep.
Not a single thing.
Yep.
I've fed chicken, turkey, beef, lamb, duck.
Yep.
Fine. No issues whatsoever. The only thing she's a little sensitive to is beef liver. I can give her a little bit of it, but she just can't have too much of it. But any vegetable, any meat, anything.
Yeah.
Fine. Absolutely
totally
fine. That dog has a little tiny bit of kibble that doesn't agree with her. It's like diarrhea for days. I'm like, what are they putting in this stuff?
Well, and the other thing is, because you hike in the woods, so you see, people won't pick up the dog poop. So you see a dog poop, but then you also see another poop that looks very different. And it's an animal, scat, whatever it is.
Sure.
My dog's poop looks more like the scat than it does the dog poop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could step on it and it won't even get on your shoe.
No.
I'm not even kidding.
And my dogs poop once a day.
We were talking with our trainer,
Yeah.
and she's like, "Oh, I don't have chicken necks this week because they didn't have it. I've had to feed my dogs kibble. This is terrible." And she's like, "I just walk around and I grind the poop in because it's like nothing. It's like chalk almost.
Yes.
You know, it's like when you feed your dogs raw. It doesn't." When I see, it's funny because when I go home, I grew up on an apple orchard, and there's tons of coyotes in the orchard.
Yeah.
And you see their poop, and it just looks like apples.
Yeah.
Because they're just eating they're just eating the apples.
Yeah.
And that's something that I do a lot of reading on carbohydrates, because with Raven, she's a hunting dog. And when I follow a lot of hunting dog people online, and they're bringing out like glucose tablets and stuff like that to feed their dogs when they're on these hunts, because carbohydrates are a huge part of keeping the dog's energy level high. Mm-hmm. And, the question of like, do dogs need carbohydrates comes up a lot. And like the Forever Dog book is basically saying no. And for me personally, with a working dog that's out and about and doing stuff like that, she just does really well with some carbs.
Yeah.
Reuben, I don't need.
Right.
And I don't need to do that. With her, it's like rocket fuel.
Yeah, I mean,
I know that they're like, well, they can do glycogenesis and their livers create carbohydrates. I'm like, not enough for what this dog needs,
Yeah.
So I think just being pragmatic about it and understanding that different dogs are doing different things. And it's like, well, but huskies they can eat all right. It's like, yeah, but they're like totally different dogs, And when they're like mushing or whatever, like they're going at that pace that their body is used to. Yeah. With Raven, when you do these hunting dog things, like I even took her out yesterday, like when she comes out of that kennel, like she is literally going 1,000 miles an hour, like as fast as she possibly can go. And she will do that for like an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, I know that there needs to be a little bit something more in there, And when I picked Raven up from her breeder, he's been breeding like generations of labs, like old school. He just looks at me like, the dogs eat IAMs. Walked away. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, I'm not going to feed IAMs.
Yeah.
But he's probably had like how many litters? So the guy's like old.
Right. Right. Like back when he started feeding it, that was top of the line.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mean, I'm not going to feed the dog IAMs, but I'm not going to tell him that he's a bad person because he did that. But like, I know that Raven's grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, like they ate IAMs, So, I mean, it's a tough issue, but I feel like if you're able to be smart about it and observe the dog and understand, like I can't feed Raven all raw food. She will disintegrate into nothing.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yep.
And if I want to continue down that like natural path of preparing her food, like I'm going to have to figure out some carbohydrate source that works for her, whether it's potatoes or oats or something like that. But in the meantime, like she does well on a kibble. So I do that, and the dog's healthy.
Yeah. I mean, athletes do a lot of carbohydrates.
Tons.
So, I mean, your dog is an athlete compared to somebody who's not doing as much. And if they eat a lot of carbohydrates, they are just going to pack on weight. So it's definitely like, just like training. You train the dog in front of you, you feed the dog in front of you.
Right.
And my two dogs are the same, just about the same weight, within like 1 or 2 pounds. But Ozzy needs a lot less than Reggie. Yeah. He's neutered. Reggie's not.
Yeah, huge difference there.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
Huge. If you're trying to cut costs, spay and neuter. Don't spay and neuter. But
well, I got nailed with an age. It discriminated Raven on her age. I love my vet, but if you get your dog spayed when they're after 2, they charge you an extra like $400.
Oh, well, Reggie will be 6 next week.
Yeah. I don't know about the neuter. We did the spay, so it's like.
Well, my vet said to me, because I didn't want to neuter Ozzy, but he's a rescue, and they were emailing and over. I got to 2.5 with him, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
He had, he had lightly elevated liver enzymes, and so I was like, can't do it yet. But I did his, and, the vet kept pushing me to do it and was like, his risk of testicular cancer is so much higher if you don't neuter him. And I go, yes.
Because he has
them. I'm not taking his foot off because it would lower the risk of you have foot cancer.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes when the vets say things, you have to leave the room. Even me, like I know these things. And when he said it, I was like, oh, wow, you're right. And then I left and I was like, what? And there was one vet that told me when I said I was feeding raw, he said, well, you know, there's a lot of risk in that, like the risk of you handling raw meat. And I go, but if I cook for my family, it's not cooked.
Right.
I'm still handling raw meat.
Right.
So I think that they get afraid because, I mean, I'll wrap it up. But one of the things in the book was that dog food has no regulations. And they also don't have to list all the ingredients, which was shocking to me. Why list any if you're going to keep some out?
Well, and they don't give a nutritional breakdown.
Yes. And on top of that, they can use sick animals,
Yeah.
bruised meat. It doesn't
Roadkill.
matter. Yeah.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
literally, guys, all
Yeah.
they care about is the data.
Yep.
All they care about is like when I do the scientific I shouldn't say all they care about, but they
Yeah.
care about the scientific analysis of the food,
Yep.
right? The numbers that come out on the other side.
Yeah.
And when you use feed grade products,
Yeah.
that means it could be a dead animal, it could be roadkill, it could be this, that, or the other thing. And what they care about is the chemical composition of the food.
Yep.
And yes, a lot of research and development goes into it because they're making a huge claim that this food can perform in a certain way and be shelf stable, which is a feat in and of. I mean, it's a feat of human development.
really is.
Really,
Yeah,
it's amazing.
it really is.
But does it have consequences?
Right.
I think is what the book talks about, and clearly there are some. So
Well, and grain free doesn't mean filler free.
right,
Like any company that is selling anything, their goal is to produce it as cheap as possible.
yeah,
So there's fillers in, unless you're going, you know, I buy Ziwi for treats only when it's on sale on Black Friday because it's so
freaking
expensive.
It's unbelievable.
So expensive. But I love the size. I love how good it is for them for treats.
Yeah, it's perfect for training.
Yeah. And I've never had a dog turn it down. But it's the most expensive food. Like it's wildly
It's
expensive.
$30 a pound.
Yeah.
I mean, $30. You can't even go into Whole Foods
No.
and be like, give me the meat for $30 a pound. They'll be like, we don't have it. $27.99 is the most expensive. It's unbelievable.
It's wildly expensive. But it's because it has no filler.
Right.
So in order to go from that to kibble, there's filler and then there's a massive cooking process.
Right.
Because I haven't researched it, but I don't think Ziwi is cooked down as much.
Yeah, they do the air dried thing. Some
Yeah.
of the ingredients that they put in there are like powdered,
Yeah.
so it has been processed previously. And that's a whole other discussion. Like when somebody asks about cooked or raw, there's two products. I won't say what they are, but there's two products that I recommend. Both, one is like a dehydrated vegetables with all synthetic supplements, and you just add the protein to it. And then the other is like a fiber powder, but it has liver in it and it has some seafood products that are in it. So basically both products, you just add whatever protein you want to use. One is synthetic, one is real food. So obviously there's differences in the way that the synthetic process is adding all those supplements versus the real food. But both the main source of calories are going to be whatever meat you decide to put into that food. So no filler as far as like carbs and stuff like that.
Yep.
But when you're looking at and honestly, Dr. Karen Becker, if you look on her YouTube channel, she goes through and talks about a lot of the different, like she talks about Ziwi Peak. She talks about like the Stella and Chewy's products. She talks about air dried, freeze dried, and even some of those products, they're using, other cooked products in the food, which isn't the worst. Like, again, because the majority of the food is going to be the air dried protein source that they're using, and whatever they're using to fortify it with, they have to do because of cost, but also because it fits into the, into the protein that they're using. But with like Ziwi Peaks, they're using you can smell it because they're using those seafood products, and which is awesome.
Yeah, you can't leave the bag open.
No. Whereas like Stella and Chewy's, they're not.
Right.
So it's like they're supplementing that with not chemicals, but they're what's the word I'm looking for? Like if you take a vitamin, synthetic.
Yes. Yep.
Synthetic. So yeah, it's an interesting rabbit hole to go down. If you're interested, I love Karen Becker's YouTube channel. I said this before, I'll say it again. There are plenty of people out there that refute what these authors say. And if you want to do your own research, I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. I've read probably about 10 blog posts from people that run up against what these authors are saying. I haven't read anything that I've found super compelling, to tell you the truth. Most of it comes down to we just don't know the level of the risk that they are claiming. But at the same time, they're not claiming a level of risk at all. They're just saying there's risk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, true.
So it's not like they're saying if you feed your dogs out of a plastic bowl, they're going to die from PFAs or parabens or whatever. Not parabens, but But they're just saying, here it is.
Yeah.
You know, and that there is some risk. It's that we don't really know. We have no idea what the risk is of being exposed to all of these like forever chemicals and glyphosate and all of this other stuff.
I mean, my dog's food comes in a plastic bag.
Yeah. When you buy raw food, it's in a plastic tube.
Yeah, I can't avoid it.
It is what it is.
Yep.
So yeah, anyway, definitely an interesting read. Definitely glad to be done with it and be able to return this library book and to be able to have the Forever Dog Life on my shelf. Thank you, Autumn, for coming and talking to me about this topic. I know you were interested in it because I follow your social media and I see, you feeding the dogs real food and stuff like that. So I figured you'd be a good person to talk to.
Awesome.
If you're listening to the show, thank you so much. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends. It helps more people listen to the show, which is our main goal here. But thank you so much, and we will see you next time.